Spring 1219, a lone Khwarezmian scout rides frantically toward the towering gates of Samarkand. His horse is lathered in sweat, its lungs heaving in the thin desert air. In his hands, he grips a leather satchel recovered from the bodies of a slaughtered Mongol patrol at the edge of the steppe. Inside is a dispatch, written in your script. When the Shah of the Khwarezmian Empire reads it, he breathes a sigh of relief. The dispatch confirms his greatest hopes. The Mongol army is starving. Their horses are dying of a mysterious blight. Their commanders are deeply divided, and Genghis Khan is ordering a massive, disorganized retreat back to the Altai Mountains. The Shah believes he has broken the Mongol threat without drawing a single sword. He orders his generals to stand down. He orders his borders relaxed. He has won. He is entirely wrong. The dispatch is a forgery. The slaughtered patrol was a sacrifice. The Mongol army is not retreating. They are gathering just beyond the horizon, healthy, united, and preparing to unleash an apocalypse upon the Islamic world. The Khwarezmian Empire is about to be systematically dismantled, not merely by physical force, but by a psychological warfare campaign so advanced, so utterly devastating, that it will break the minds of millions before a single siege engine fires. The war has begun, and the enemy has already lost. The Mongol war machine of the 13th century is often remembered as a blunt instrument of destruction, a tidal wave of blood and thundering hooves. But the truth is far more terrifying. Genghis Khan and his generals were absolute masters of the human mind. They understood that the strongest fortress walls mean nothing if the men standing behind them have been driven to madness, despair, and internal mutiny. To fight the Mongols was to fight an enemy that manipulated your reality, your senses, and your deepest primal fears. The destruction of the Khwarezmian Empire begins with a masterclass in information warfare. The Mongols command the Vastyam system, a network of relay stations designed for rapid communication across the steppes. But as they approach the borders of the Shah's empire, they do not use the yam merely to coordinate their own forces. They use it to subvert the enemy's intelligence network. Mongol commanders deliberately dispatch riders carrying fabricated documents into areas they know are heavily patrolled by enemy scouts. These riders are ordered to fight to the death to make the deception believable. When the Khwarezmian scouts recover the documents, they bring back a highly detailed, completely false narrative of Mongol weakness. It is the illusion of vulnerability. By feeding the Shah exactly what his ego wants to hear, the Mongols induce a fatal lethargy across the empire's defenses. The Shah spreads his forces thin. He cancels emergency grain requisitions. He leaves his border fortresses under-garrisoned. He has been blinded by his own intelligence network. But the Mongols do not strike immediately. They wait, they calculate. They employ a devastating tactic of chronological desynchronization. The Mongols possess an intricate intelligence network of merchants, spies, and defectors who have mapped not just the geography of the Khwarezmian Empire, but its temporal rhythm. They know the exact dates of the Islamic holy months. They know the precise weeks of the local harvest cycles. They know the hour the garrison changes its guard. When the invasion finally begins, it does not happen on the Mongol schedule. It happens precisely when the enemy is most vulnerable in time. They strike the border towns during the most sacred hours of prayer, or at the exact moment the peasantry is stretched across the fields for the autumn harvest. The psychological impact is immediate and paralyzing. The enemy is forced to make an impossible choice, abandon their divine duties and their winter food supply to man the walls, or face the wrath of God and the certainty of starvation. This fracturing of time shatters the enemy's daily rhythm. Chaos replaces order. Panic replaces preparation. As the true scale of the Mongol advance becomes apparent, the border garrisons look out into the night and see their doom. But what they see is a carefully orchestrated lie. The Mongols are a highly mobile cavalry force, but they are often outnumbered by the vast sedentary armies of the empires they invade. To overcome this, they weaponize human perception. As night falls over the Khwarezmian outposts, the Mongols employ the silhouette illusion. Every single Mongol warrior is ordered to light not one, but 5 campfires. The horizon burns with an ocean of flame. But the deception goes deeper. The Mongols travel with a vast remount herd of spare horses. Before dawn, they tie life-sized effigies, dummies made of straw, dressed in spare armor and helmets, to the saddles of these riderless beasts. Through the morning mist, the Khwarezmian defenders look out and their brains suffer from hyperagency detection. They hallucinate an army of unimaginable scale. A force of 50,000 appears as a horde of 200,000. The human mind simply cannot process the mathematics of survival against such numbers. Before a single arrow is loosed, the defenders are gripped by an existential dread. Their morale evaporates. They believe they are fighting the entire world. When the border towns inevitably fall, the Mongols do not simply slaughter everyone. That would be a waste of a vital asset. Instead, they unleash the human tsunami. The Mongols are meticulous catalogers of populations. When a city falls, they separate the inhabitants. Artisans and engineers are enslaved for the Mongol war machine. But the rest, the elderly, the starving, the destitute, are deliberately spared. They are driven like cattle out of the burning ruins and pointed toward the next major Khwarezmian stronghold. This is the weaponization of refugees. Tens of thousands of traumatized, starving civilians flood into the next target city just before the Mongols arrive. The results are mathematically catastrophic. The city's food stores, calculated to withstand a 6-month siege for a population of 50,000, are suddenly burdened with 100,000 desperate mouths. Rations are slashed. Disease erupts in the overcrowded slums. But the true genius is the psychological warfare it inflicts upon the social order. The ruling elite, safely holed up in the inner citadel, hoard the remaining food. The refugees, abandoned and starving in the outer districts, turn violent. Class warfare explodes. Riots tear through the streets. The city consumes itself from the inside out. By the time the Mongol banners finally appear on the horizon, the city's defenders are exhausted, bleeding, and deeply divided. They have been broken by their own people. The Mongols observe this chaos and apply another layer of psychological pressure. The white-bone exile. As they encircle the smaller peripheral towns around a major capital, the Mongols enact a highly specific, highly visible form of class execution. They gather the captured population. The common peasantry, the laborers, the merchants, they are spared. But the aristocracy, the nobility, the men of white bone, they are systematically and brutally executed in full view of any escaping survivors. This is psychological decapitation. The message spreads like a virus into the besieged capital. The Mongols are not here to destroy the people. They are here to destroy the corrupt masters who let you starve. Inside the capital, the starving refugees and the exhausted peasantry look at their well-fed lords with newfound hatred. Mutiny brews. City gates are thrown open in the dead of night by desperate peasants hoping for Mongol mercy. The aristocracy is paralyzed, forced to fight a two-front war against the Mongols outside the walls and their own subjects within. To understand how Genghis Khan dismantled empires piece by piece, we must examine the deep psychological foundation of his warfare. Genghis Khan understood a fundamental truth of human nature that his contemporaries completely ignored. He recognized that the human mind is the primary battlefield. In the medieval world, warfare was viewed purely as an exercise in kinetic energy. It was about how many men you could put on a field, how thick your armor was, and how high you could build your walls. But Genghis Khan realized that physical reality is entirely subordinate to psychological reality. Fear is a contagion. It is a pathogen that bypasses stone walls and deep moats. If you can inject fear into an enemy's mind, you override their training, their discipline, and their loyalty to their king. The Mongols did not just want to defeat their enemies. They wanted to render them psychologically incapable of resistance. They understood that the human brain relies on predictability. We find comfort in patterns, in the rising of the sun, the cycle of the seasons, the familiar sounds of night. When those patterns are violently disrupted, the brain enters a state of profound shock. The Mongols engineered environments of total unpredictability. They dismantled the reality of their victims. They made the impossible happen, and in doing so, they convinced their enemies that they were fighting something supernatural. It was not an army of men. It was the wrath of heaven itself. This psychological dismantling continues as the Mongols tighten their grip on the Khwarezmian strongholds. If a city proves too stubborn to break from the inside, the Mongols resort to ecological manipulation. They do not merely besiege the walls, they besiege the earth itself. Mongol engineers march miles upstream of a fortified city and begin a massive earthworks project. They dam the life-giving rivers, diverting the water supply entirely. Inside the city, the wells run dry, the aqueducts turn to dust. Or, if the season is dry, the Mongols set fire to the surrounding steppes and forests, choking the city in a perpetual cloud of black smoke. This alters the microclimate and destroys any hope of foraging. To the defenders, this is terrifying. It is a false winter. The very environment has turned hostile. The psychological demoralization is absolute. The besieged believe the gods have abandoned them, that the natural world itself is bowing to the will of the Khan. As night falls, the true horror begins. The Mongols initiate acoustic warfare. They do not launch a full-scale assault in the dark. Instead, highly mobile light cavalry ride in sweeping arcs just beyond arrow range. Affixed to their arrows are carved bone whistles. Fastened to their saddles are howling kites. As they ride, they loose these arrows into the sky. The air is suddenly filled with a shrieking, unearthly wail. They do not aim to hit anyone. They aim to hit the nervous system. The sound triggers massive adrenaline spikes among the defenders on the walls. Men grip their spears wide-eyed, expecting a charge that never comes. The Mongols ride away, only to return 2 hours later, and then again and again. This is the weaponization of adrenal fatigue. The human body is not designed to endure constant, high-stakes adrenaline rushes. By dawn, the defenders are shaking, physically depleted, and suffering from acute sleep deprivation. Their reaction time slow, their judgment is impaired. They are shadows of men, holding weapons they no longer have the strength to swing. But just as the defenders prepare for the final, bloody assault, the Mongols stop. They withdraw. They pull back their siege engines. They set up camps out of artillery range. And then, inexplicably, they begin to celebrate. They hold the Nadam feint. The Mongols slaughter sheep, drink fermented mare's milk, and engage in loud, boisterous wrestling matches. They act as if the war is over. They feign total lethargy. For the defenders on the walls, this induces violent cognitive dissonance. They are braced for death, keyed up for the fight of their lives, and suddenly their enemy is ignoring them. Days pass. The tension on the walls slowly, inevitably, begins to slacken. Exhausted guards fall asleep at their posts. Commanders leave the ramparts to rest. The city breathes a collective, fatal sigh of relief. It is precisely at this moment of maximum vulnerability that the Mongols strike. The celebration vanishes in an instant. The true assault is launched with lightning speed against a completely unprepared and relaxed defense. When the Khwarezmian forces finally face the Mongol vanguard, they are met with a sight that breaks their hearts before it breaks their bodies. The dogfight strategy. The Mongols rarely risk their own heavy cavalry in the initial breach of a city. Instead, they drive thousands of conquered auxiliary troops forward to fill the moats and absorb the first wave of arrows. But these are not just any prisoners. The Mongols meticulously select prisoners from neighboring Islamic states, culturally and linguistically identical to the Khwarezmians. The defenders looking down from the walls are not firing upon strange invaders from the eastern steppes. They are looking into the faces of their cousins, their co-religionists, their neighbors. The Khwarezmians are forced to slaughter their own kin just to reach the Mongols. It is a grotesque pre-battle kinslaying. The moral high ground is instantly shattered. The psychological resolve of the defenders turns to ash as they drown in the guilt of murdering their own people. And then comes the final, most terrifying tactic of all. As the auxiliary forces are wiped out, the true Mongol heavy cavalry forms up for the decisive charge. In every other theater of war across the medieval world, an advancing army relies on noise. Knights roar battle cries, infantry beat their shields, drums pound to build courage and synchronize the advance. The Mongols do none of this. They execute their final, devastating charge in complete, absolute silence. No drums, no shouting. Only the muffled thud of hooves on dirt and the creak of leather. This sensory deprivation is catastrophic for the enemy. The Khwarezmian defenders rely on auditory cues to gauge the speed, distance, and aggression of the incoming assault. Deprived of sound, their brains panic. The silence is unnatural. It is the silence of executioners, not soldiers. It conveys a cold, mechanistic inevitability. Before the first Mongol lance strikes home, the Khwarezmian lines break. Men drop their weapons and run, fleeing not from an army, but from a silent nightmare they cannot comprehend. The Khwarezmian Empire, one of the greatest powers of the medieval world, collapses. Millions perish. Cities that stood for centuries are wiped from the map. It is a victory of unparalleled totality. Genghis Khan did not conquer the world merely because he had the best horsemen. He conquered it because he understood that before you can break a man's body, you must first break his reality. He turned time, sound, nature, and human compassion into weapons of mass destruction. He showed the world that true power does not lie in the edge of a sword, but in the dark, uncharted territories of human fear. History looks back at the Mongol conquests and sees a storm of unprecedented violence. But beneath the blood and the ash lies a cold, terrifying intellect. A reminder that civilization is fragile, that the structures we build to protect ourselves, our walls, our armies, our laws, are merely illusions of safety. When faced with an enemy who understands the primal circuitry of our minds, who knows how to sever the fragile threads that hold our sanity together, those illusions vanish. We are left only with the brutal, uncompromising truth of our own vulnerability. The decisions made in the tents of Genghis Khan echo across the centuries. They ask a question we are still afraid to answer. If the mind can be so easily dismantled, what is it exactly that makes us strong?